You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, your source of music news, stories, and 2-hour deep dive interviews with bands that have sold over 150 million albums. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as the vocalist for the multi-platinum selling band P.O.D. They've sold over 12 million albums and they've been nominated for 3 Grammy Awards. So welcome to the podcast, Sonny Sandoval. Sonny, how are you? And how honored were you to have your own Valentine's Day card that featured you and P.O.D. on the 14th? I thought I would be honored if I had one of those.
It's just one of those things where you're scrolling on Instagram and you see it, and then it's like, oh, it was put out by Sick New World, and you're like, oh, that's cool. You know, we're just kind of happy they thought of us, and obviously they included us in the loop of things. So most important thing is that everybody had a wonderful Valentine's Day.
For our listeners that maybe don't know Sick New World, it's an incredible festival. And some of the other cards, there was a Korn card, there was an Evanescence card. These festivals are some of the greatest festivals on the planet. There's hundreds of great bands on there.
Yeah. I think it's the third time they're doing it. So it's really a throwback to just a great era of music. To me, those late 90s and 2000s were very original. It was some of my favorite bands that have come from that era, you know what I mean? So I think this is, with so much music and, you know, there's so many different kinds of genres. It's just really a throwback to that, you know, I guess you could call it new metal, but for me, it was more of a time when every band sounded like themselves. You know, and then they stood out. Everybody was doing their own thing, but kind of in the same genre, but they had their own style and they were doing their own thing. So all those bands, it's an honor to be looped in with all of them.
And did I see that there's 2 different dates and locations?
Yes, I guess those first 2 years they did it in Vegas, and then so now there's doing one in Vegas, and then they're moving it to Texas, one in Texas, but. I mean, they can do this anywhere. They can do this around the world if they wanted to. It still confuses me why they only do one day. Like you said, there's probably 100 bands, and you're not going to see all of those bands, which is frustrating. And so it's all in one day. So they could probably spread this out to a 4-day festival. But whatever, they have their rhyme and reason. You just have to schedule it out, and you're going to be running from stage to stage trying to catch your favorite bands.
I like to start the interviews by sharing with our listeners how the guests and I know each other, or at least how we ended up here talking today. So in our case, a few months ago, I did an interview with Cami Kehoe. And while doing my research, I saw that she was coming off a huge tour with Daughtry, with Seether, and with P.O.D. So I reached out and you provided some kind words, and your quote was so good that I started the interview with your quote. And we got Cami right in the feels. She had nice things to say about you. And then from me reaching out, I saw that you had released your new book. So I went out, I got the book, I read the book, and the chapter on Testify inspired me to make a podcast episode just sharing that a pre-fame Katy Perry had sang on on a hit P.O.D. song. And I put out that episode, you helped to share it, and it got over 1 million views. So I felt like, okay, we got a little momentum here. So I thought I would ask you if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, because I've been a fan since 1999, and here we are today. So thank you for the quote for Cami, and thank you for sharing that episode.
Of course, man. That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I once we met that way, then I started following you, and I seen all the stuff that you were doing and you were posting. So once you hit me up, it was cool. It's just always about finding the perfect schedule.
You had the big tour that I mentioned, and then you get back, and most people, now it's time to take a break, but you head out on a big tour. Was it Brazil you went to?
I think we had 7 shows in Brazil. We did Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica. So we went from that amazing tour with Seether, Daughtry, and Cami. I think we were home 2 weeks, and we went straight to South America. So it was amazing. The South American fans are just one of a kind, absolutely incredible. But it's always a bummer to tour in December because it feels like we're gone. And we were probably only gone like 2.5 weeks, but you really do miss that American Christmas feel, So we didn't get home till I think the 20th. So instantly we're jumping into Christmas holidays and trying to make it all work. And it works out, but if I could do it my way, definitely keep December off just for family holidays.
You should just be happy that you didn't tour here in Canada in December because it gets a little chilly up here.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been to Canada. I mean, obviously it's promoters and it's the right tours and stuff, but we've been wanting to go back to Canada for the longest time.
I'm in Ottawa, and again, I mentioned I've
Uh,
been a fan forever. I've never seen P.O.D live, which is like heartbreaking to me.
oh
Ha-
man.
I'm assuming, have you never played Ottawa? I'm assuming Montreal. I'm assuming you've played
hmm
Toronto, the major markets. Do you know the last time you've been either Montreal or Toronto? It's been a hot minute.
I want to say the last time we were in Canada was probably around 2015, so or it's 14, maybe 10, 11 years. I know we did a festival, but normally when you do it's the major cities. But there was one tour where we started on the West Coast and we shot all the way to the East, which was a first for us. And it was stopping everywhere in between. And it was really nice because we had never really traveled like that in Canada before. And it was really, really cool. I remember I had my son with me and he was still young. So it was, we had a little adventure in Canada. And I want to say we might have played Ottawa during our independent days, like it's some kind of outreach youth type of festival or but it's been so long, bro.
You'll have to come back at some point. You definitely have a lot of Canadian fans. You guys have a lot of gold, platinum, and multi-platinum certifications here for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully soon.
We're going to do a full 2 hour deep dive here. We're going to cover your life, your career, your discography.
Awesome.
There's so much to get to. 2024 and 2025, you did a lot of stuff with POD as well as a solo artist, a first time author.
Mhm.
So we're going to get to that. But there's a
Okay.
whole story leading up to that. So let's get started all the way back at the beginning. Where does this love of music come from? Is there an earliest musical memory that maybe jumps out at you when you think back?
Um, I mean, I've always been surrounded by music. I come from a young family. So as long as I can remember, there was always vinyls, playing or in the crates or parties and, music involved. My uncle actually played the drums. So he was in local bands and they would practice in the garage. So we were always introduced to stuff like that. And certain people in my family all had different tastes, you know what I mean? So I came more from a rock and roll family, like AC/DC, Black Sabbath, stuff like that, Led Zeppelin. Um, but then on my dad's side, it was more a lot of reggae music, more alternative music, like the Pretenders and the Police and stuff like that. And so, as a young person, you just kind of, I mean, music is healing for the soul. So you just try to gravitate to whatever resonates with you. And then it wasn't until I probably got into my early teen years where I started diving into hip hop music and punk rock music and a lot of reggae music because it was very to me it was very street. It was very conscious. It was about something, and so I really really respected that. Um, yeah, and then just going to concerts. I think my first concert my dad took me to was the Police, and Oingo Boingo actually opened up for them, and I don't think they weren't known then because I remember as a kid, I think they might have even covered a Police song, and I turned to my dad and I said, "Hey, is this the Police? Because I know the song," and he said, well, it wasn't. So later on, I didn't realize how punk rock that is that a band would open up for another band and actually do a cover
You better
of
do
their
a good
song.
cover though if
You
the
bet.
real band is
Well,
there.
it's Oingo Boingo, so I'm sure it was pretty amazing. I just don't remember it. I was pretty young, but after that, I would just go to a lot of reggae local shows and punk rock shows, and yeah, it's always been a part of my life.
And when did you go from just being a fan of music to actually becoming a musician and singing yourself?
I mean, if you want to call me that, that's it's an honor. It's I tried playing guitar when I was young, stuff like that, but nothing really stuck. 'Cause I'm not really a look at me type of person. I'm not like a center stage. I don't, I don't, I don't want that attention. You know what I mean? I'm the kind of guy, if the camera is around, I'm the one that avoids it. You know what I mean? Not mostly like video. I'm just not that guy that's a song and dance kind of guy. So it was never really part of my nature. And so I never, it's not like I ever dreamt of being a band or I had posters on my wall saying, one day, I'm going to do this. It was never anything like that. My intentions were just, finish school, work hard, start a family and be a good person. But it wasn't until I was 19, and my mom, she passed away of leukemia. And so that really set me on my journey of faith and trying not to get caught up in the neighborhood that I was from. Um, Trying my best as a 19-year-old to navigate through this crazy world, crazy streets that my mom just passed away, and um, trying to really to discover who I was. And that's when music kind of became a big part of my life, or even more so, because Marcos and my cousin, they were already in bands and they were jamming around town for the couple years, and we would go to their shows. Um, and then they wanted to try and do something a little different. They were more like a thrash metal type band, and they really wanted to do something with reggae music, with hip hop music, more street. And after my mom had passed away, and I'm trying to figure out, who I'm supposed to be, they had asked me if I wanted to just join their band and let's start a new band. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was mostly, I think it was their intentions to kind of keep me out of trouble and just keep my head right, just because I was going through a lot of things. And so when they had asked me to be in this band, I laughed it off like, that's, you know, it's weird, it's strange. Like I'm not that guy. And then, and I actually had said no. I had said no, that it's not really, wasn't really my thing. But then a bunch of stuff happened, and I write about this in my book. A bunch of things happened that I call them. I believe they were signs that said, you're supposed to do this. And so I write about it more detailed in my book. But things had happened, and then that's when I had told the guys. I said, I think I'm supposed to do this. And so I really felt like it was a calling in my life, to do something positive, to do, it's not like I knew what I was doing, but I figured, why can't I grab the microphone and scream into it, all the things that I'm going through, everything, all the stuff that I'm experiencing. Why can't I? A lot of the bands that we were into, like the hardcore and the punk movement, they were all about something, whether it was straight edge or, they were Hare Krishna or Buddhist or vegan or whatever your stance was. We were like, why can't I do the same thing about Jesus? I'm discovering who Jesus is, and it's a huge part of my life. It's what's keeping me afloat. So why can't I scream about it? And it's not like I knew what I was doing. It was just like, it was more, and it's not like I expected it to go anywhere. It was just, I'm just gonna grab that mic and I'm gonna scream my heart out, and that's it. Um, and that's what we did. But we started playing keg parties and clubs. We weren't even 21. We couldn't even get into them. But we started to build a buzz around San Diego, and people were like, look at this band from South San Diego. They're doing something different. They're taking heavy music and they're mixing it with hip hop music and reggae music. And we had a DJ way back in '92. It was something that wasn't very known or seen, and especially not from four brown guys from the neighborhood that you expect would never be into this kind of music. So I think people were more shocked. Our tattoos, our dreadlocks. It was like, who are these guys from San Diego, and they're doing this this new music, and it's kind of cool. We like it. And so we just kept on doing it. We all worked full-time jobs, and it was just something we did independently, and we would I think it was in '94. We did our first little 2 week tour. We just got in a van with friends and headed out, and we would do a couple weeks every summer until one day um, we built up enough buzz that we can probably do this full time and not just during summer. And that we made a decision to quit our jobs and really chase something that felt right at the time. It was a big sacrifice and a big jump for us, but we did it believing that we had something.
In which ways do you think that growing up in San Diego influenced you as a person and then later on as a musician? Reading your book, it seemed like there was this community there that everyone was hanging out and there was lots of musicians.
Yeah, I mean, we're such an eclectic. It's like there's so many different cultures and ethnicities and colors. You know what I mean? And if you're from the neighborhood, you're from the neighborhood. It wasn't like we were in a all Mexican neighborhood or black neighborhood or white neighborhood, Asian neighborhood. We were all mixed together. That's just the San Diego culture, and so it wasn't uncommon to go to a house party and then you have a bunch of Mexicans playing the heaviest metal you've ever heard. But that was, again, it's not seen. You know what I mean? It's like you think, oh, we're Mexicans, we should listen to mariachi music or Latin music. We're black, we should listen to rap and R&B. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. People put you in categories, but where we come from, it was like, no, there was Asian guys and girls and Mexicans and black brothers and sisters, and they were doing heavier music, or we're 10 minutes from the beach. You know what I mean? My friends that were black and Mexican, Asian, we would go surfing and skating. So it was still something that wasn't really seen throughout, most of America. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, we're a big melting pot. So we were doing it all. There was just no camera on it.
When we scheduled this interview, I put out the bat signal to the P.O.D fans if they want to submit questions. What would they ask you if they could sit down with you? So I have all these fan questions, including a
Oh
lot of
man.
fans from Brazil that miss you guys already. So I'm going to sprinkle in these fan questions as we go. The first one is from Matt Larson, and Matt's question is, who is or was his biggest inspiration musically?
Like I said, I was listening to reggae music. I was listening to hip hop music, and it was mostly because of the lyrical content, and what it was doing to me personally. You had hip hop music, which was such a struggle, from the streets. You know what I mean? It was kind of like this survival, the survival poetry, and this uprise, and I was drawn to it. Reggae music had a lot of old school scripture. It was a lot of positive stuff. And even though I didn't know scripture at the time, there was something that was resonating to my soul. It was keeping me a positive person rather than being a victim of my streets and selling drugs and getting into gangs and hurting people. There was something about this music that was saying, don't. It was telling my inner being, don't be like that, don't do that. And I learned a lot later that the Bible says that the word of God will never return void. So even through reggae music, the scripture was being planted into my soul, into my heart. So it was making me not want to fall victim of the streets. And so, I mean, anywhere from I grew up listening to, from Run DMC to Boogie Down Productions, Rakim, Public Enemy, all the greats. But then in reggae music, I was listening to obviously Bob Marley, but the Peter Toshes of the world, the Revolutionaries, Dennis Brown, Still Pulse, and it was again, it just kept me from being a victim of my circumstance. And then once I discovered the bad brains, it was like, or suicidal tendencies, because to me, I always liked punk rock music, but I was never like a Sex Pistols fan. To me, in my young mentality, it was like, well, that's a white English music. I know nothing about England. I'm not a white person from England. So why would I listen to that music? It wasn't until I seen like suicidal tendencies, and you have these Mexican guys, you have this black guy, and they're doing this punk rock music, and it was like, what do they know that I don't know? Why are they doing that? And I seen Bad Brains. It's four black guys from DC, and they're doing punk rock music and hardcore. And it's like, what do they know that I don't know? They're onto something. And so it made me dive into that world. And it was like, okay, punk rock or even hardcore, it's not a white thing. It is a street thing. It is a conscious thing. There's all these different colors and melting pots that I'm used to from San Diego that make up this punk rock and hardcore community, and I just didn't know about it. So it was a whole new world that I was able to jump in and kind of discover. Um, but yeah, and then U2 is a huge influence to me, just because again, lyrically and just they write music from the soul that resonates with me. And um, yeah, so U2 is probably one of my favorite bands of all time. Bono is definitely one of my favorite frontmen, just not only for his music and lyrics, but for his humanitarianism, everything that he contributes to the world. Um, HR from Bad Brains is probably the one of the best frontmen that ever existed. So it's all those things.
I've never seen U2 live, but I hear it's almost like a religious experience when you go. Bono just commands the room like he's
Yeah,
taking you to church.
he's 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 gifted, man, and I think it's because it's real to him. You know what I mean? The same way that I would hope that would be from P.O.D., where it's like we're not demanding that you believe the same things. We're not demanding that that we're even like minded. We just want you to enjoy the music and be open minded to it. And so, for me, it's like I believe my faith is everything to me. I believe it. I'm willing to die for what I believe in, and I hope that that resonates through the music. I don't need you to agree with it, but I do want you to give it a chance so that it really does sit into your heart, mind, and soul. And I know that's what U2 does. I've been to a couple concerts, and you just kind of sit back and you're just like you're going through so many different emotions.
How early on did people start calling you Sonny instead of Paul Joshua?
Uh, all my life, I don't,
Was that
I mean,
a family thing or
yeah,
okay.
I think everybody in our family pretty much has nicknames. You know what I mean? So it's just, I mean, I think if you ask my dad, he'll say, "Oh, he started calling me that." If you ask my grandmother, she would say she started calling me that. So I don't know who came up with it. All I know is that that's what my friends call me.
Before POD, back in high school, there was unlicensed product. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about unlicensed product?
Um,
This is a way back playback here.
yeah, yeah. It was We grew up in teenagers and stuff, and everybody, my friends wanting to rap and stuff like that. And there was two of my buddies, Chris and Rick, and they were kind of formed their own little rap group. And then they had asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. And um, one of my brothers, DJ Mike Ski, he was in a group called the Legion of Doom, and they were probably one of San Diego's first, hip hop groups to come up. And he was always making beats, and he would make beats for whoever wanted it. And so a bunch of my friends started jumping on that train, and he was able to record. This was, dude, 30 something years ago. It's way back in the day. And they would go to his house, and he would, have beats where all these guys can rap on it. And I didn't know what I was doing, and we were, I was just going along with it. I thought it was cool. It was just something my friends wanted to do, so I would do it. Um, and we would go to house parties and maybe try to grab the mic. We would, um, I mean, I really didn't. Again, it wasn't something I wanted to do. I think I was just, just, I was just a third wheel, maybe, and with my buddies. And I think maybe we went to one club one time and they let us do one song that we had. And it was probably the only performance that I think I ever had up until POD. Um, but other than that, it was just more of a bunch of friends having fun.
Let's dive into your career with POD. So the band starts in 1992. Normally, I ask how you met the other members and where the idea of starting a band came together. But in your case,
Mm.
you mentioned already it was friends and cousins essentially that you started POD with.
Yeah, they were in a different group called Escatosh, and it was more thrash. It was a four-piece, two guitars, and but Marcos was doing guitars and vocals. And it was more thrash, real pit, kind of like a Sepultura type of music. And we would just me and all the homies would just go with them to these house parties, and it was more just to make sure everything was cool, nothing would pop off, and we would all go everywhere we rolled. We it was just a big group of us, and we at the same time we were kind of discovering this world of heavy music and mosh pits and stuff like that. But it was kind of a bad combination because you take a bunch of guys from the hood, and it's like we don't know how to act. We didn't know that there was rules to. It wasn't moshing, wasn't dancing to us. It was like, oh, we can go in these pits and we can go and let out this aggression and even get into fights. And so we had to learn real quick that that's not how you were supposed to behave. There was a real art form to moshing and slam dancing. Um, and so we would just go and watch the guys and keep them safe, and then again, like I said, once they wanted to do something different, that's when they asked me.
You mentioned P.O.D. guitarist Marcos. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't reach out to one Marcos Curiel and get some kind words. So Marcos says, Sonny, in my eyes, with all the respect in the world, is the man, the myth, and the legend. He embodies humility in every sense of the word, and he backs his talk with real walk. Compassion
Oh,
overflows from his being. As a creative, a family man, and one of the baddest lyricists on the planet, he drops
mm.
truth, knowledge, and light. I'm glad to call him a friend, but most of all, my brother. It's an honor to travel the world together and rip stages across the land. I'm blessed to have him in my life. That's from Marcos, P.O.D. guitarist.
Oh, dang, that's awesome. Ooh.
So, so
That's
was it
touching.
was it a conscious decision from the very start that POD would be a band that was positive, uplifting, inspiring? Because not a lot of bands are that, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that was us from the beginning. It was because we listened to the Bad Brains, Santana. Like there was a lot of hip hop. There was a lot of the elements of music that we were listening to that was, again, we were fighting against the neighborhood, the grain. Like I don't want to be that. I want to be a light. You know what I mean? And those guys had already come from a faith background. So when I would go watch them play these house parties, and they would get up, and it wasn't like they were shoving their faith down anybody's throat, but they were very, they were about it. And I respected that. So I think when I came to faith and I got into this band, I was trying to carry on that torch. It was just very immaturely, and it was like most of us do when we discover faith. You know what I mean? It's like we don't know what we're doing. We fake it to make it. We act like we know what we're doing, and that's the problem with a lot of people who start going to church or discover their faith. You know what I mean? They want to act like they got it all figured out, and that's not how this faith game works. And so I think for me it was the same way. I was trying to carry on this torch that they had already started by being over the top. Maybe I was being a little bit too forward. I think we were a little militant at times. I think I was a little militant with my faith because I come from a neighborhood in the street where it's like we have to defend ourselves all the time. So it was more like, and then here we are playing with these hardcore bands and punk rock bands, and everybody's about something. And the moment there's a confrontation, we're not the guys to sit back and you know turn the other cheek, like Jesus said. We're more like, what? And so if people were going to be mocking my faith or coming against what I believed in, a mature person would have stepped back and said, I'm not going to let this phase me. A mature person in their faith would have said, dude, I love you. And I am going to turn the other cheek, and I'm going to let you have your opinion. But we were more like, dude, you say something bad about my faith or something about my God, like we're going to have problems. But that was more of a street neighborhood mentality. It wasn't until later that I realized, why am I so defensive of such a loving and merciful God? Like, why? I don't have to defend my faith. I don't have to defend my God. Um, and so as we went or as we grew, we learned, you know, and um, I think that was just it was just a learning process for us. And it wasn't until I think Satellite when we really did make a conscious decision to say, hey, let's try to be more universal with it. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, let's just let the music kind of speak and do our thing, and let's speak, just try and speak to a broader audience. And then obviously the history of Satellite, it did just that, you know.
You mentioned listening to Suicidal Tendencies and Santana. Did you have a full circle moment when later on you were able to work with those artists?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'll never stop being a fan of music or whatever I'm into or, you know, you're into. It's like I have a love and appreciation for those individuals. And so I just saw Mike Muir the other day, and it's like I'm still in awe. You know what I mean? Like even though we're friends, and he even texted me before I seen him, you know, wishing me a happy holidays, and it's like he had texted me, and it was like I'm getting this text, and my wife walks by, and I started laughing, and she's like, What's so funny? And I said, how cool is it that you know you just get a random text from Mike Muir from Suicidal Tendencies? Like I'm that kid that's saying, dude, that's how cool is that? You know what I mean? Um, and with all the great musicians that we met, it's more of a I'll never stop being a fan. It's that's why I hate when people get a little success. These musicians get a little bigger than they were a couple years ago, and then they're walking around like they're, you know, there's something, and it's like, dude, don't flip it now, man. If you got to be the person that you were when you started this thing, because this industry will they'll lie straight to your face and make you believe that you're something you're not, and then you're gonna chase that, and then you're gonna follow it straight into the fire. And so I just stay humble. I appreciate all the relationships that I've made, that I will continue to make, and I'm a better person because of it.
Let's dive into the band's discography. So you've released a ton of albums, so I'm going to kind of pick and choose some highlights as we go. The first two albums, so Snuff the Punk in 1994 and Brown in 1996. When you think back to those two albums, what thoughts, memories, emotions come to you now? Those two albums really kicked off this journey you've been on for the last several decades.
It's funny because I've had this conversation with my son. You know, he's 18. He's you know he's starting. He plays drums, but he wants to do vocals, and he's starting a new band when he wants to try and do vocals. And he listens to those records, and he's like, "Man, this is so cool," you know. And I'm like, "Dude," when I hear and he'll play these songs and ask me questions, and I'm like, "Dude, turn that off." You know, it's like I cringe at it, and he's like, he don't get it. He's like, "What?" He's like, "This is so good," you know. And I'm like, "Dude, it's horrible," you know.
You were a
Because
musician
in
in
my
development back then, right?
yeah, but it was such an immaturity, like from all ends. It's like you got to understand, like I'm coming from, you know, I'm a teenage kid who never planned on doing this, never been in the studio in all of his life, you know, had never even performed on stage. And then I got thrown into this, and it was like, so I was learning on the fly, you know, and then being in the studio for the first time, it's like you're just learning, and it's just so you're so insecure hearing your voice in the headphones, and trying to do something that you really have no business doing. You're just you're just there because you're passionate about it. You know, you're living in this moment. And so it was always a learning process. And so when I listen back, I mean, obviously we did everything independently, so it wasn't like we had the money for a great recording or any of that stuff. Um, but we were still teenage kids, not only musically but lyrically. Um, and so yeah, I cringed at a lot of that stuff, but it was a process. You had to go through it. We, you know, like I said, we put out the independent albums, and then once we signed a major deal, it was still a learning process. And then when Satellite came out, it was just like, hey, okay, now we have to switch things up a little bit. But those first two albums, they're hard to listen to. I would definitely love to, but not only because it was immature, but even vocally in the way I sound is it's easy to say, oh, I was young, but it was like, nah, I just didn't know what I was doing. It's not that I know what I'm doing now. It's just like I don't know, man. It's just something that you learn. I've been learning for 34 years. Every time I'm gonna jump in the studio soon, and it's like it's not like I go in there like, oh, I got this down, I got this mastered. It's like, no, it's a new moment every time. I got to go in there. I got to hear my voice. I got to try to lay down what I've been thinking in my head the best that I possibly can. And so it's just taking a lot of those tools for the last 34 years and putting it to use. And let's just say back then my tool belt didn't really have much. That's it.
I guess maybe the best way to look at those two early albums is you couldn't get to fundamental elements of Southtown and Satellite without those first two albums developing you as a musician along the way. And
Yeah.
the first two albums, you sold tens of thousands of copies independently, which helps build the buzz, helps attract the attention of a major label like Atlantic. So maybe you're not maybe looking back at those albums, the music and your performance isn't where you'd like it to be today, but it's definitely the foundation of led to the success afterwards and where you are today.
100%. I think a lot like a lot of things in my life, I kind of learn on what not to do. But that's only because we've experienced it, we've gone through it, we've failed time and time again, and it's like it's learning, okay, we're not going to do that again. But yeah, you needed those records to move on. And it's just like a live performance as well. When I listen to a lot of old school stuff now, a lot of things pop up from 20 something years ago. And it's like, in a lot of those shows, my voice is always blown out because it's like, dude, we were doing 200 and something shows a year. You know what I mean? I come from that hardcore punk rock scene where it's like, I'm not warming up before shows. You know what I mean? It's like, the crowd was always going nuts. If my voice is out, I'm going to give the mic to the crowd. They're going to sing it for me. It's like the interaction, it's just the way it was. It wasn't until later when you start getting on bigger stages and realizing, oh, dude, I can't always depend on the crowd to help me out. It's not that intimate anymore on these bigger stages. And so, at some point in my career, it was like, oh, it became a must to warm up. And then I learned later, like, oh, dude, if I don't have in ears, I'm gonna blow out my voice. We're a monitor stage kind of guy, and we just blow out our vocals, and but we're playing 200 something shows a year. We can't do that. So you're learning as you go. And so again, like I said, we go through so many things only to learn from our mistakes and say, okay, I'm not gonna do that again. And it's both live and recording in the studio.
Has the technology really changed between the monitors in the early days and then the technology of the quality of the
Oh
in-ear
yeah.
monitors today?
I mean, it's a game changer. Deep down in our hearts, we're still that punk rock band that just, plugs in and plays and goes off, right? Um, and I'll never stop being that guy. At heart, I'm that guy. But you know, throughout the years, it's like your band becomes a corporation. It becomes a partnership. It becomes a business. All these things that you never think about back in the day. It was like, dude, we're just playing because that's who we are, and it's just a blast and it's fun. And I'm doing this because I'm with my brothers and we're having a good time. But the more that you grow, you get older, and it's like now even to compete with today's technology, and I think P.O.D's only been doing this for a few years now. We were playing with so many bands where we were that band that just plugs in, plays, mistakes and all, playing with broken strings. It's like we're just that band because that's our mentality. But all of a sudden, we're around a bunch of guys that are playing to tracks, and they're playing, and they have clicks, and they have all this stuff, and it's like there's no way that we can ever compete with these guys because we're raw, we're punk rock. That's where we come from. But now learning to not go to that extremes with technology where we're too prideful to not play our own instruments. We're too prideful to not do our own parts. But there is a balance in between to make our show, to try to get a little bit better. It's like we had to get on in ears. We had to start playing to a click. We had to start because when we're in the studio, we were starting to make records that was like, I don't want to overproduce it, or I don't want to be too much going on because we'll never be able to duplicate that live. But then we also didn't want to hinder ourselves when we're in the studio of being as creative as possible. So then now it's like, hey, well, there's no way we could ever duplicate that live. We brought in a backup guy who would play keyboards and sing to just try to fill in wherever. But even that, after a while, was like, oh man, that's a lot of work, you know. So we had to move to tracks where it was, you know, whether it's a synth sound or a certain a cool sound that we threw in during the recording that we can't duplicate that live. It's stuff like that. And so with without, you know, just tracking the whole thing, it's like we got to put all the cool and tasteful ambient stuff to be able to just kind of fill the room, because when we go up and the rest of these other bands play, it's like, oh man, we're too punk rock for these arenas, you know. So that's technology. You just got to learn to go with it, and as long as you stay true to yourself, it's like, hey, I can live with that.
Speaking of technology, it comes into play with the next album, The Fundamental Elements of Southtown in 1999. This is the band's big breakthrough. There's two singles, Southtown and Rock the Party. I'll get to the technology element in a second with Pro Tools and being one of the early adopters of Pro
Mm.
Tools. But my first question is, do you remember the first time hearing your own music on the radio? Was it Southtown or did you get some independent radio play with the first two albums?
We had gotten not, I wouldn't say we didn't get play. We got, I remember I was working night crew at the grocery store, and it was a local station. It still exists. It's called 91X, and they used to have a, I think it was a shout out to Loudspeaker. I think that it was Loudspeaker where they played local music. And but it was like, you know, from like 12 to 3 in the morning. But perfect for me. I'm working night crew. So I remember we were told that, hey, they're gonna play our one of our songs. And I was working night crew, and I told all the guys, hey, throw it on 91X, you know, it's playing throughout the grocery store. At some point they're gonna play P.O.D. And then, you know, finally they did, and everybody stopped, and we all kind of gathered around and listened as they played it, and everybody was, you know, hooting and hollering. And then we went back to work, you know, and that was probably the first time. But then I think there was we were on tour. It was just independently, you know, us four guys in a van and trailer, and we had just played a packed out show, a bunch of kids going nuts. And as we're gassing up, and I was always the nighttime driver. As we're gassing up, you know, filling up on coffee to drive, you know, 10 hours to the next show. Another local radio station had just, they played our song, and they said that, and the DJ was saying, I don't know if you guys were at this underground show, but P.O.D. just played and they rocked it, and here's one of their songs. And to us, that was huge, because it was like we're in a different state. They're playing our song. We had a great show, and you know, it just felt like we were doing it. And here we are. We're going to another show to play, and it was a cool experience.
I remember the very first time that I heard Southtown on the radio, and you have the slow melodic intro that kind of lulls you into this sense of comfort. But then the whole band kicks in, and I remember it just exploding out of the speaker. I'm sure a lot of people had the same experience. And one reason why this album is kind of a landmark album is it was one of the first successful rock records that was made using Pro Tools, the software that allows you
Mm,
to digitally edit and manipulate music. And I went to school for audio engineering, so I know how
mm,
amazing Pro Tools is. And I remember reading a chapter in your book where people suggested, "Hey, how about you work with Howard Benson? He's one of the Pro Tools guys." And you guys were like, "What's a Pro Tool?" Uh,
yeah.
so can you share how you ended up working with Howard and what he brought to the table? So since then, he's gone on to be one of the biggest, most
Yeah.
successful, most celebrated producers, period. But back
Yeah.
then, he kind of broke through with you guys.
Yeah, we were his first gold and platinum record. And I mean, Howard's a musician, but he's more of a computer geek nerd, you know what I mean? And so when we were gonna go with a guy named Ed Stasium, and we were used to analog. This is the school that we come from, And Ed Stasium did like the Living Color records, and we were like, cool, man, he's a cool dude, old school. We're gonna go with him. But then our A&R John Rubely at the time said, hey, I want you guys to meet up with this guy named Howard Benson. And so we took a meeting with him, and once he started describing Pro Tools and computers, and this is 98, um, it was like this makes no sense. We have no idea what this is. Um, but he convinced us. He just said, dude, it's the future. But everything he said still didn't convince us. So the only way he sold us was we'll still record on the analog. He said, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up taking all of that and dumping it onto the computer, which is foreign to us. And he's like, and then that's where I'm going to do all my work. And we're like, well, okay, well, the compromise was as long as we can record old school style analog, And he did that. And then once we kind of sat with them during the whole studio and recording process and really was seeing what he was doing, it was just night and day. And so by the time we did Satellite, there was no more recording on the analog. We recorded straight into the computer because that was just the future. And then now it's just gotten, I mean, now kids are doing it off their computers, and it's just, they make it so user friendly, but back then it was really cutting edge.
I reached out to one Howard Benson, and I have some kind words. And Howard, for our listeners that don't know, besides all the success with P.O.D, he's done monster albums with 3 Days
Mm-hmm.
Grace, with My Chemical Romance. So many great albums were made by
Yeah.
Howard. And he says, I met Sonny in 1998, 1999, when P.O.D and I decided to work together. Sonny was so locked in to who he was and what the band wanted to represent. I knew we would create great music together, even though we came from very different backgrounds. They were my first hit record, and I will always have a place in my life for them. That's from Howard Benson.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. Howard he's a special human being. He taught us a lot. I mean, he was our first real producer. I mean, we always joke about this, but he taught us the structure of a song. We were independent when we came to him, and so we'd sit down and jam out songs for him, and they'd be 8-minute songs, because we were just going forever. There was no structure. So I remember him sitting us down with a paper or a eraser board or whatever, and literally writing out the structure of a song. Whether it's intro, verse, B section, chorus, back into the verse, and and to this day I still use it. To this day, I'm teaching my son because they'll like same thing. They're so passionate and grimy that they'll just jam, and I'm like, dude, you have to break it down, And so we learned all that stuff. So much we've learned from Howard. So it's pretty crazy.
You mentioned that this album was his first gold and platinum album, but it was also
Yeah,
your first gold and platinum album. Do you remember
of
receiving the
course.
news that it went gold? I think it took about 7 months to go gold and then maybe a year and a bit to go platinum. Do you remember those phone calls and what that meant to you?
Yeah, it was we had released Southtown, but it wasn't like we went, our label took us to radio or anything like that. We were touring like we always do. We didn't know anything different but to tour. But I think they had presented to like some college stations and stuff because now we were going from like playing underground to, the bar scene in the college areas. And so whatever, that was their rhyme or reason how to promote our band. But it all kind of started for us when we got a shot on Ozfest. And once we got a shot on Ozfest, um, and then it was, TRL and MTV. And then once the fans were able to vote, it was the dedication and loyalty of our fan base that we had built for 7, 8 years. They were the ones that were calling and voting and saying, I want you to play POD. I want you to play POD. And because of their vote and their consistency of it, our songs started to make Southtown actually, I think it made like top 10 videos, and it was playing with the Britney Spears of the world, Backstreet
Backstreet
Boys. So
Boys. Yeah.
yeah, so people were tripping out, and then like Blink 182 stuff like that, Korn obviously, and Limp Bizkit. They were probably the only other heavy bands on there. And all of a sudden, this no name band comes out, and it was like same thing. It caught their attention. It was like these guys look different. They are different, and what is it? And so we just kind of got on their that TRL radar, and that's what sparked it up. And then by the time I think it was that's what got the buzz going, and so they projected a gold record. So by the time we were recording, we had to shoot the video for Rock the Party, and that's when we had gotten word from John Rubley, our A&R, who said your album's gonna go gold, and so they wanted to present Howard the record. And so on the video shoot of Rock the Party, we had actually paused during the filming of it, and we gave Howard his record, and he had no idea. So it was just really special, you know. And then obviously that video is what took us over the top. It went number one on TRL, and that's what shot us to a platinum record. So it's been an adventure, man.
That music video for Southtown, that ended up being super influential for other heavy bands making music videos. I mean, you can feel the touch of Southtown on Papa Roach.
Yeah,
Last Resort, you can feel the touch of Southtown on System of a Down, Chop Suey.
yeah.
Did you guys know at the time that you were doing something different and special, or is it only in retrospect that you can see that? I guess most bands, when you make a music video, you hire a venue, you hire
Yeah,
actors and extras, and you took it back to the people, and maybe that's why it
yeah,
feels so organic.
yeah. We were obviously it's Southtown, so we were Marco Siega. He was up and coming director at the time. Now he's gone on to do so many great videos. He's done the latest Dexter series, you know. But at the time, you know, he we gave him the song, and obviously we're like, dude, we want to highlight our city, our town. We want people all around the world to see this is where we're from, right? Because we knew that our culture was unique. We knew that our culture was different. We weren't just your another, you know, rock and roll band or another metal band. It was like we're different, and the world needs to see that. And because he knew of our band, he knew that we were a live band. So it was more like we don't want to do that. We don't want to incorporate actors. We want to incorporate real fans, your neighborhood, your street. And so um, he said, I want this video. Not only will we get the town and neighborhood, I want it to be a live video. Nobody was doing live videos at the time. It was just big production. He's like, I want to see real people around a stage because that's your people and that's you guys. And so we agreed 100%. We ended up setting up a stage right in front of the driveway of the house I grew up in. Me and my cousin grew up in. And we invited the entire neighborhood to come. We said, "Hey, we're shooting a video. Come through, you know, and we're gonna make this happen." And so they did. And that was once people got that feel, again, it set us apart. And I think that's what sparked these other ideas. Because Marco Siega went on to do the Papa Roach video. He went on to do the Toxicity video, but he was coming off the idea like, "No, man," because those bands obviously are live bands as well. So why we don't need a Hollywood setup? Let's just be real. And you know that's what he did. You start asking real fans to come through. It makes it even more special. But it really did start with Southtown.
You could even say that the fans and Southtown itself are almost like a fifth member of the band in that video, or
Oh, 100%.
they're even the star of the music video.
Oh, they're the stars for sure. It was such an eclectic group. When you look around, you see every color, you see every different kind of band represented on their shirts. You know what I mean? From Mohawks to dreads, everything. It was like, who are these people? And you know, what is this Southtown? You know, and that's exactly what we wanted to accomplish. And then we did the same thing later with the Rock the Party video. It was like a lot of those people, there were actors, but a lot of those people in the video were our friends and family. But because our friends and family are so diverse and made up and they all look different, that's what we wanted. We wanted to have, you know, a punk rock guy or the punk rock world represented. You know, we wanted the hip hop world represented. We wanted all these different colors and nationalities represented where You probably didn't see that in most rock and roll metal videos. It's just a metal crowd. But we were saying, no, dude, we're so much more than that. And there is in all these colors and ethnicities, they like metal just as much as, or at least our people do. They like metal just as much as they like hip hop or reggae music. It's like, dude, we're a melting pot of people. We wanted the world to see that.
And were you surprised by the success of the singles and by the album, or did it feel like an inevitability at that point with the fan base you were building, with all the touring you were doing? Did it feel like that was coming, or was it still shocking to reach gold and
No,
platinum?
it was absolutely shocking. We were just doing what we know to do, and that's just tour, 12 months out of the year. That's just what we were. We're one of the hardest working bands now. We were one of the hardest working bands then. We didn't have, a handout. We didn't have, the $1 million budgets. It was like, I honestly believe that our label, they signed us. They didn't expect us to do anything. It was like it's like it was a flip of a coin. It was like, hey, if they do, obviously they're going to take credit for it, but it's not like they worked it. It's not like they bent over backwards, pulled any strings, did whatever they could. It was like it was because of the fan base that we had built for 7, 8 years. It was because of certain opportunities that we took and doors that we walked through on our own that sparked the attention. And so when it went gold, that was a shock. Um, when it went platinum, even more of a shock. It was just we were always grateful and appreciative. Yeah, we didn't know that it was going to happen. When we did the next record, now before Satellite was released, I was expecting. I said, you know what? In my heart of hearts, I believe that we earned every single one of those people, those million people, right? We grabbed them one by one. It wasn't a fluke. I believe that that's how hard we worked. And so I expected them to come with us on the Satellite record. What I didn't know was that our album was going to be released on 9/11. Um, we didn't know that we were going to have these anthem songs that would take on a whole new meaning after 9/11. Um, but it did. And then that record went beyond platinum record. It went and sold millions and millions of records. And so that was unexpected. That part of it was unexpected.
You didn't know that your 1 million people would become 7 million
Yeah.
people over the next album.
Yeah. No idea. Yeah.
We'll dive into Satellite, but I have one final thing about the album before that. I went back and I listened to the entire P.O.D. discography as well as your solo album in preparation for this interview. And one thing that jumps out on the Southtown album is the bass playing. Can we take a second to acknowledge the bass playing on
Mm.
that album?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can we pour one out for Trey? I mean, the bass playing is so tasty on that album.
On Southtown?
Yeah, on the fundamental
Oh,
elements.
yeah.
Yeah. That I
Oh, yeah.
that's a standout thing that's happening when I'm listening to
Yes.
that album.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I mean Trey is he's a funk R&B jazzy type of player. So he grew up. He never listened to metal music or punk rock or hardcore. It wasn't until he saw us playing that he was like, I like these guys. I can get into this. And I write about this in my book. We had a bass player for about 6 to 9 months in the beginning, and when he didn't work out, we had a crazy show with um, Rob Halford's Fight at the time at the Whiskey or the Roxy in Hollywood. And I don't know why they invited us, but they did. And to us this was a big show. And then all of a sudden we have no bass player. And then we borrowed Trey from my uncle's funk band. And then we never gave him back because after that we were like, it's a good feel, it feels good. And so on that record, he really does explore. I mean, he's messing with his pedals, but he did a lot more slapping and funk stuff back then. And so recently we were talking about with the new recordings, we're like, dude, we have to incorporate some more slapping and
Let
that
him
kind of
slap
stuff.
at
And
the
so,
bass on the
yeah,
new album.
slap at the bass all you want, my man. Thanks for recognizing that. That's cool, dude. I'm going to let him know.
Awesome. So 2001, you released the album Satellite, and despite it going on to achieve a massive amount of success, you mentioned already it was released on quite possibly the worst release date of all time on 9/11. We have a fan question about this. Andrew John asks, what was it like to have your album released on 9/11 and then have your songs play on the radio in the aftermath, particularly the song Alive?
It was, I mean, like here we are, we're off the success of Fundamental, we're working our butts off, we're in the studio. There, all this anticipation, expectation, um, and we had. I kind of want to set up the scenario. We had just played for TRL at Battery Park, literally like 3 to 4 days prior to this. And I remember for the first time we were driving past the Twin Towers, and I remember to this day we were like such tourists. We were so amazed. Hey, there's the Twin Towers. Like I don't even think we ever seen them before, you know. And we're like, dude, check it out. And our buddy, rest in peace, Matty Matt. He's like explaining, New Yorker, local. He's explaining everything to us like a tourist guide. And here we are, just super excited. We come home. Back then, albums they were released on Tuesdays, and that Monday night at midnight, we did a signing at the warehouse. I think it was the warehouse or Tower Records or whatever it was, but it was like, real when they actually sold records, back in the day. And all of a sudden, in San Diego, there were so many people that showed up. We were there for hours and we were shocked because we were like, I can't believe people want our record like this. It's crazy. Knowing that day on 9/11, we had a record release show at the Whiskey in Hollywood. And so here we are till 4 in the morning. We're going to go home, sleep for a few hours, and then head up straight to LA to get ready for this CD release party. And as I'm knocked out in bed, we get a phone call, and there was turn on the TV, turn on the TV. And so instantly, we're turning on the TV, and like everybody else that witnessed this, our hearts were broken. We were shocked. And so at that point, I mean, I could honestly say that at that moment, the record didn't matter to me. I forgot that the record even existed because what I'm watching on TV was devastating. And so obviously the CD release, it's canceled, because now we're just glued to our TVs, wondering what's going to happen to the world. And at the time, a bunch of our representatives from Atlantic Records from New York were in town to help us with the release of our CD. So they couldn't even go back home. They were stuck in San Diego with my family, and my family's cooking for them every day, and we're literally in front of the TV for like, almost a week and a half, just waiting. They're waiting for the call to say that they can come home back to New York, and we just waited. So, again, it didn't matter about our record, but it was the fact that our songs were already resonating. Alive, I think, was already, top or number one at radio. It was number one on TRL. So it was already resonating with the world at this point in time, at least the US. And so I still remember at one point they would still record TRL, and I think they had asked me to call in to give words of encouragement. And I remember like my heart sunk because like, what do I have to say? But I think it was only a handful of people. Like I remember Lenny Kravitz got on, and it was all because it was all these musicians that had positive things to say. And we happened to be a rock band, but we happened to have something to say. At this time, the number one video is called Alive. It's about being grateful, for every breath we take. And now we're facing one of the craziest tragedies, in US history. So it resonated with people at the time.
This episode has been brought to you by the Women in the Music Industry podcast. It's hosted by music producer Rob Wells, who has worked with global superstars like Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and Selena Gomez. Through his 1 hour interviews, he shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in the music industry. Some of his notable guests include Morgan Lander of the multi-million selling metal band Kitty, and Pam Shane, who co-wrote Genie in a Bottle for Christina Aguilera. If you're a fan of the Joel Martin Mastery podcast, you'll love the Women in the Music Industry podcast, which is available on all platforms. You were one of the few bands that got affected in two ways from this. So after 9/11, they released a list of songs that were not allowed to get
Mm,
played on the radio. So you would have Stained. Stained had the song Fade that got banned because the video shows a clock tower crumbling and it just would remind people of something
mm,
crumbling.
yes,
There
yes,
was a
yes.
band, Joy Drop. They had a song called Sometimes Wanna Die. Like anything like that got banned. So
Yeah,
you guys got a little bit of that with the song Boom, a little, but on the
yeah.
other end, you had one of the positive songs that got pushed as an anthem, like Alive. So you're one of the few bands that had two songs that
Yeah,
were at both ends of that spectrum that got affected.
yeah, yeah. That I mean, that list, they went across the board trying to. Everybody was so sensitive at the time, so it was like, hey, and it wasn't even like Boom was a. It wasn't even a song um, that went to radio or anything at that time. Alive was the only song, but they were just, they were kind of ahead of the game there, saying, hey, that's the last song we want to play. But there were so many songs. I think the Drowning Pools, Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, was that kind of thinking. Anything that would remind you, of the tragedy or bring any type of emotions and feelings. But I was cool with that because that same thinking and mentality is what drove people to actually pay attention to our song. I mean, our song was already charting; it was doing well, but it was probably it was that desire for something bigger that probably drove that single over the top. Because if it was just another day like today, it was like, oh, that's cool, that's a catchy song, it makes me feel good. Next, you know what I mean? But it was because we're in rock and roll. There's a lot of darkness to it. There's a lot of negativity. A lot of the bands at that time are always whining and crying about stuff. That's what made P.O.D. stand out, where we were saying, dude, I'm grateful to be alive. You know what I mean? Look at my circumstances, but I'm not a victim. I'm not whining. I'm not crying. I'm saying, dude, I'm grateful to be alive. And that's the mentality that people were looking for. People were looking for a solution at that time, and but unfortunately, 25 years later, we've gone back. Well, even before then, it wasn't much longer. A few years after that, everybody slowly puts away that heartfelt thinking of what's the meaning of life and why did this happen and there's got to be more to life and does God exist and do I really love anybody? All these a cool headspace to be in. It's like it goes back to the selfishness. It goes back to the gimme, gimme. This is what I want to do, and so you know that's why POD. We were just. It was kind of like we were just in. Not, I wouldn't say a phase, but we were the band that was bringing meaning and solution at the time that people were looking for. And then once people get comfortable again, they move on, and then it's like, hey, give me the nonsense of the world again because it's entertaining and I want it. And we've just never been that band.
The album had four hit singles: Alive, Youth of the Nation, Boom, and Satellite. To me, those four songs sound like undeniable hits. When you finished writing and recording those four songs, like you had the final product you could listen to, did you know that you had something special across those four songs?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny because we did. I remember all the New York reps, radio guys and gals, and they had come to the studio, to Howard's studio, and actually listened to the songs. And that's when we were deciding, hey, what should be the single? And I remember we wanted Boom to be the first single because it was kind of like the Southtown for this album, and it was very fun. It was like, hey, we can. It still represents POD. This is a POD sound. Alive was still new to us because I really had ventured out and trying to sing a little bit more and do different stuff. Um, and so we were shooting. I mean, we were fighting for Boom, but it was a lot of the reps that came in and said, why not hit him right off the bat? Like we know that Alive is eventually going to be a song and or a single, and so is Youth. But why not just hit him? Why wait? Let's just hit him out the gate with a big anthem like Alive. And so they did, and we actually we followed suit because we believed that they were right, and they were right. It's not like they knew that 9/11 was going to happen, you know what I mean? But that song was already resonating with people. That song was already meaningful to Americans. And then when 9/11 happened, it stood out amongst it all because it was different. And it was only different because it was positive, it was uplifting. And that's what people were looking for at the time.
So I bought this album. I played it all the time. I was 16 years old when this comes out, and the album debuts in the top six. It sells 133,000 copies in 1 week. It stayed in the top 10 for 5 weeks. 133,000 copies sold in 1 week is such an absurd
Yeah,
number. How do you
yeah.
grasp numbers that big?
It's I mean, especially now for like these young people that don't even know what that means. You know what I mean? It's like that means that 133,000 people physically went out, drove to a record store, bought a CD or album or whatever, tape, and came home with it, put it in their radio and listened to it. It was a different world back then. So even now, it's like to like they'll people aren't going to sell platinum records anymore. No one's buying records. So now they gauge it differently. Oh, you guys had so many streams, or you had so many views, or it's to me it's too new school, man. It's like we're old school, and so to know that at that time it was such a treat because every week that was the first question we were asking our A&R and our label. Hey, how many records did we sell this week? And we would get reports. We'd be on tour. We'd get weekly reports, and we were like, this. It was silly to us. It was absolutely silly to us because what's like what is happening to our band right now, but at that time we had already put in almost a decade of work. It's not like we've been hustling and grinding forever, and it was like, wow, this hard work is paying off, and it was awesome. It was a great feeling.
Youth of the Nation, now the second single, it went to number one on the alternative charts and on the modern rock charts. It's still to this day the band's most played song on Spotify. 350 million plays. I was saying how
Yeah.
133,000 is an absurd number. Try 350 million. Why do you think people love that song so much, even to this day, all these, decades later?
I think it's the overall meaning of the song. um but there's a certain vibe to it. There's a certain feeling to it with the big drums. You know what I mean? It's like it just this eerie guitar riff. It just really kind of hits you right in the heart from the beginning. And people, I think anyone can feel that. But obviously lyrically, it's like we're asking the question. I mean, we're putting ourselves into a category that we're all these people kind of just looking for hope, looking for truth. Um, and that one went, I think so. When Alive was released, it was only released in the United States. Our label hadn't even planned to do anything internationally, but it was because of 9/11, and then instantly, the reception of Alive. Um, Outside of America, Youth of the Nation was the first single. It wasn't Alive, so Alive was never even released outside of the USA. It was because of the reception and the warmth that we were getting from fans that they instantly said, "Okay, we're going to release Youth of the Nation, but this time we're going to release it internationally." And as soon as they did that, we were instantly doing promos in Europe. We went to Japan to do promos, and it was like this is a whole new world for us. Now it's international, and to this day, we're grateful that we have an international fan base. A lot of these bands, they can sell out arenas in the United States, but they can't. They don't tour South America. They don't tour Europe because they don't have a fan base there. So we're grateful that because of Youth of the Nation, it had such a reach outside of the United States. And yeah, to this day, I think that song is more relevant now because the question we're still asking in that song is, there's got to be more to life than this. And here we are, 25 years later, and we're still dealing with, you know, gun control laws. We're still seeing kids take matters into their own hands. We're still seeing there's still a big gap. And yeah, I always say it's hard to be a young person these days. Harder anyway.
On the strength of the album, you guys received 3 Grammy nominations, which is maybe the highest level of honor you can receive as a
Mm.
musician. What do those Grammy nominations mean to you?
These are all just cool recognitions, accolades are cool. That's cool because in the industry, you know, point of view, it's like I guess it all matters, you know. But we're still those neighborhood kids that are like, okay, what does it really mean? Like in the scheme of the industry and all these things, what does it really mean? Um, I don't know. It's not. Does every musician want to win one? Sure, why not? But at the time, I think we were just more excited, you know, for the nominations. We were excited to go to the awards ceremony, and I think we had gotten to the ceremony, and then we had caught wind that, um, hey, we're not going to win it. If they already knew before the show even started. So what do? We never even sat in our seats. We were like, our A&R John Rubley, I think he got us a limo, and we took our wives. So, here we are. We don't even know how to dress up. We're like in khakis and, in Chuck Taylors. We don't even, that's just who we are. And the moment they told us, hey, you're not going to win, we're like, cool. Like, well, let's not blow this limo. Let's go out. There were some after parties or whatever, but I think we got back into the limo with our wives, and we cruised around Hollywood. And it was like, that was more fun than being at the ceremony.
So final question about that album. I just want to kind of paint a picture of the success. So there's 4 hit singles, a bunch of #1 songs, #1 videos, 3 Grammy nominations, 7 million copies sold of the album. Almost no human
Mhm.
being will ever experience that level of success as a musician. Can you try to put into words what that whirlwind of maybe 2 year period, what your life was like?
It was wild. I mean, even just coming off of Fundamental, it wasn't. I remember all we did was tour. That's all we knew. And then, like, the more that popular your band gets, we're going from underground to now we're headlining our own, theaters and clubs. And it was like, this is crazy. We're getting invited to play the, radio rock shows. This was so different from the 7 to 8 years of doing stuff independently. It was so different from, what we were doing. But so we were just playing everywhere that we could, and it wasn't until we'd come home from these tours off of Fundamental that you go home and hang out with the family, and all the homies come over, we're barbecuing, we're playing cards, we're having fun. And it's not until your family and friends are actually saying, like, dude, you guys are blowing up. And it was like, we don't know that, because all we know is show after show after show, airport after airport, flying in, and we're working 7 days a week. But it's like, you guys are blowing up. Obviously, we knew that things were happening because, again, you're watching album sales, and like, this is crazy. And then when Satellite came out, we were constantly busy, and then you just see that the demand for your band was like, this is, man, only so many years ago, nobody of quote unquote importance cared. Only people that cared were the kids that were coming out to our show, and us. We're the only ones that cared. But now it's a whole different audience. It's not the underground world anymore. It's like, this is mainstream world that actually cares for the first time about this band from Southtown, San Diego, California. Because they didn't give a damn for 8 years, and it was a weird feeling, but it was a nice feeling, and it was a humbling feeling. But at the same time, I knew that's not what we were doing that for. It was great, the recognition, but it was like, hey, we're in the thick of the storm, just trying to be who we set out to be. And I already knew that was going to be challenging because, yeah, we're not just a San Diego band anymore. We're playing around the world, and people know who we are. People, people know my band. And now it's like, okay, and now was a challenge for me. Like, how am I gonna? Or now I have to try and live out my faith as best that I can. Now I have to take all these different tools that I have, and hopefully not be a victim of Hollywood, be a victim of this rock and roll industry. And so that's something that we would have to navigate for years to come.
In 2003, you guys released the next album, Payable on Death. There's two singles, Will You and Change the World. Coming off of the insane success of the
Yeah.
previous album, did you just feel a ridiculous amount of pressure going into this album?
No, didn't feel the pressure at all. It was we were actually the only thing that we had at that point we had went through is it was a guitar change. Here comes this whirlwind of success. Everything that comes with it. Miscommunication. Egos and pride. All these things, and then before you know it, by the end of our touring cycle and album cycle, we're fighting with our guitar player, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves not together, and that's like insane because this is the biggest record we've ever done. We're on top of the world right now. This makes no sense. We're renegotiating our contract with Atlantic Records. We're about to get paid for the first time from the label, and we were in a great position, a position that we had worked so hard to be in. And then because of miscommunication and a fight with our guitar player, we separate, and then our whole world just kind of collapsed on us. But that was one thing. That was a personal thing. But we felt like we did the record that we wanted to do. Will You had went number. It was we were back in the same cycle. Will You went number one on TRL. It's top of the radio. It's the same thing. So we're like, okay, it seems like we're just moving forward, right? With the changes, we're still moving forward. But at that time was when everything was crashing as far as the labels go. The labels were merging. Everybody that we had built relationships with at the label were all sitting by their, phones waiting to get the call that says you're fired. You know what I mean? They had downsized, I don't know how much percent on every label. So even I remember flying to New York, and we would just go floor by floor by floor in New York of all the departments. It was like a Disneyland for musicians. And here we went there, and it was like each certain labels didn't even exist or levels didn't even exist. You go to some departments and the lights weren't even on because everybody was saving money. It was like they were having this complete crash of the labels. And so we're like, what in the world is going on? But then as soon as we do Will You, which is our first single, number one, we do Change the World. We're getting ready to go on Lincoln Park, the biggest tour of the summer. We're thinking that we're right in line for more albums sold, more success. But then because of the crash of the labels, we find out that our Change the World video, which was such an amazing song and video, never even was released to MTV. And MTV was responsible for putting us on the map. I think so. I mean, the fans were responsible, but MTV as a platform was responsible for breaking this band. And now you didn't even release our video to them. If after a number one video, we had a number one video on TRL with Will You, and you never released our second video to them. And it was sitting on a desk somewhere in an office in New York because they were waiting to get fired. And eventually they all did. All the people that we had spent years building relationships with. And that album, you had seen that whole album. We had all the tours to back it up. We were doing nothing different except for the fact that the label was no longer, they were no longer working us. One, because they were going through their changes. But two, I believe it's because at the end of the day, they already got what they wanted out of my band. It was a success story. They took us to the top. They got their money. They did whatever. There was no reason to keep promoting this band, which they never intended to in the beginning. It was the fan base that did it, and all that Atlantic Records did was right. They rode they rode that wave because of the fan base and the hard work that we all put into it. But then once, all the stuff started happening with labels, I think we were just disposable to them. They already gotten more than they expected out of us, and so they could just move on because now the labels were merging, other bands were coming on, and they were taking on bands that were nowhere near the success of P.O.D. But for whatever reason, they chose to take these guys, and then whatever bands, maybe because they signed them or they liked an A&R better than our A&R, and he just signed this new band that nobody knew, but they were going to take him to the top, and so they just let P.O.D. kind of ride it out.
Man, if a band loses their champion at a record label, you
Yeah,
just kind of get lost in the mix. And I guess that's a part of what happened with you guys is those that were there championing you over the last two albums aren't there anymore to keep you guys at the
yeah,
forefront of everyone's thoughts at the label. And what's wild is despite not having the support from the label, the album still goes gold, sells 1.3 million copies.
yeah,
For any other band but POD, that is a massive, massive success. But you guys have
yeah.
that one previous album that sold so well that this is considered not quite the success.
Yeah. Luckily, we had our international fan base, and so we've always been allowed to do that. I think it was more just a mental thing, an emotional thing to just be like, man, how could they just drop you? Like that makes no sense. We are still on this rocket ship. We're still the Willy Wonka elevator hasn't even hit the roof yet. But you guys just decided, and I know it's politics. I know it's who it's who benefits from it. I mean, there's still execs now that are there and they're on top of the food chain, and it's like, dude, they didn't do nothing. They did nothing for us. But yet you look at their resume and there's P.O.D. right there. Oh, I signed these guys. Like, no, you didn't. You didn't do nothing for us. You just took the credit for us. And then unfortunately, that's just the way this industry goes. And then they did that with the following record. Same thing. It's like, and then they were giving us such big budgets. It's like, obviously, if you're giving us $2 million budgets, you care about this band, right? We were just following it, believing it. Oh, you care about this band. But all they were doing was just building up our debt. And then it was like, you must believe in us because you're doing all these things and we're going, we're going. And then same thing. By the time Testify came out, it was like, you guys did nothing for us. We have Glenn Ballard he has Grammy sitting on his counters collecting dust. That's how many he has, right?
Jagged
And
Little
and
Pill,
he
right? Alanis Morissette,
yes,
like
he
biggest
created
album
Alanis
ever.
Morissette. Yeah, that's where we met Katy Perry. She was his next protege, and so it was such an amazing experience, regardless. But the album did nothing. I mean, the label did nothing with the album, and so it wasn't until the next record that we fought to get off. Even though the budgets were there, they were supposed to give us, a lot of upfront money, and we could have pocketed all of that and and went to the studio for $300 and pocketed the rest of the money. But at that point, we were so exhausted of because we put our heart and soul into everything that we do. And the last two records you shelved us. You did nothing with it. Why would we want to do another record with you guys? And so that's what got us through that Testify record. Was like, dude, the only way we can do this is if we just move on and try and do stuff, or do it ourselves again.
We have a fan question from Fernanda Gomez. Her question is, what has changed in your voice and in your way of singing between 1992 and now? Then she says, POD just finished a tour here in Brazil. I had the pleasure of going to the show in Belo Horizonte. Come back
Uh,
soon. Don't stay away for too long. We love you here.
oh, the Brazilian fans are amazing. All South American family is just they make us Americans just we're just bystanders. They are a part of the show. They really are that fifth member. Absolutely incredible. But I think it's like what we had talked about before. It's just kind of learning new tools, where you're not always screaming from your stomach or your chest and then blowing out your throat. You know, and now that I can actually hear myself with in ears, I can actually sing at lower levels, or I can actually hear what I'm doing and not trying to compete with, a blown out monitor or something like that. Um, and it's just, again, I don't have nothing figured out. All I know is I learned from what not to do that I used to do, and I try to move on and get better. A lot of it is a lot of head voice, trying to get things out through your head rather than blowing out your voice. Um, yeah, that's it, man. And like I said, I don't claim to know how to do any of it. A lot of it is just I love doing it, and so I want to keep doing it for a while.
In 2006, you guys released the album Testify. We've talked a little bit about it. There's
Mm.
3 singles, including Goodbye for Now. Despite not having that support at the label, still sells over 500,000 copies worldwide. We have a fan question about the album. Dylan Shea Hernandez asks, is there a plan to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Testify this year? Maybe a deluxe version of the album.
Um, no plans on doing that just because we are going into the studio. We're already writing for a new record. So that keeps us busy. The last 2 years we've been luckily just slammed with touring and opportunities, which has been great. There's been such a resurgence of just, this whole genre that it's really kept us busy. So we're grateful for that. And I always love doing anniversaries and stuff like that, but it's kind of just whenever the opportunity presents itself. Um, I mean, it wouldn't be a testify thing, but obviously we throw this idea around here and there. What I would love to do, and I think the fan base would love to see, is because now that Marcos is in the band, there was 2 records that were talking about Payable on Death and Testify that he wasn't a part of, and we play a handful of songs from those records. Um, but I would love, it would be an absolute dream for me to have Marcos and Truby, um, and we did like a tour, even if it was just a couple short legs. It'd be awesome to be able to incorporate more of those records into our set, and obviously play the songs that everybody knows. But to have both of these 2 legends on stage together, it's such a huge part of our history, because we were friends way before Jason ever even came to the band and did those records. He's still a friend of ours now. It would be awesome to have both those guitar players on the same stage and do and just be POD as one.
We have a fan question from Mike Lalone. His question is, ask about how the Katy Perry vocals came to pass on their track Goodbye for Now. I'm certain there must be a good story there. So if you could maybe just share quickly how that happened. So this is about 2 to 3 years before she blows up with I Kissed a Girl and has never looked
Yeah,
back as one of the biggest artists in the world.
exactly. It was so cool because here we are with Glenn Ballard. It's like he's got his studio slash home, and it really is such a homely, like not homely, just a home environment. And every day we would eat together. We'd have dinner, in the house, and we really did just enjoy this experience together. When we did Goodbye for Now, we had discussed, man, it would really be cool to have a female vocal, kind of this like, angelic kind of singing at the end and just kind of round it all out. And he said, well, I'm actually working with a young lady, and I think she'd be perfect if you guys catch her vibe, whatever. And he's like, I'll just have her come over, hang out at the studio. We'll hang out, eat some dinner, and then you guys decide if she's the one. And he would show us all these cool little videos that she had made, and we're like, okay, cool. She's just this young girl, right? And she started coming over, and she was just really such a tomboy, really goofy and hanging around, and just super cool. She had her own P.O.D. story experience, and obviously we knew she was talented, but once she was hanging out and we actually liked her vibe, we're like, of course we wanted to sing on it. And so she sang the vocals, and then she would just come and hang out just for the fun because it was such a cool recording environment. We'd have friends coming over all the time. We'd have an amazing dinner every night, and so she just started to come over to hang out because it was cool. But then once we released the record, we did the video. We did a couple. I think we did like a Jay Leno. I think we did a couple live shows, and we asked her just to round it out and to fill it up if she'd be a part of it, and she was always down. She was always super cool. And we knew that one day, dude, she's gonna blow up one day. That's just all there is to it. And so when she started to track, and we were following her career ever since then, we were like, oh, dude, yeah, we watched her skyrocket straight to the top. But for that season, it was such a pure and like innocent, just a cool vibe. No industries involved, no making of divas, just a bunch of couple punk rock. Even us, like we were always punk rock. Katy Perry was punk rock, at that time. She was punk rock, and it was a cool short little season for us.
I'm going to jump ahead through the discography because I want to make sure to talk about the new P.O.D. album, your solo album, as well as the book. So you guys released four more albums between 2008 and 2018. There's three things I want to touch on that I think are cool.
Mm-hmm.
In 2006, Hit Parader named you in their list of top 100 metal vocalists of all time. I thought that's awesome. You guys released a
Mm.
greatest hits album, which most bands never have one hit single. So to have enough to have a greatest hits, I think is pretty awesome. And then the last thing is in 2023, the city of San Diego declared June 23rd to be Sonny Sandoval Day. Is there a greater honor than that? I mean, I don't know of one.
No, not for this San Diego boy. It's just like, yeah, it had me in tears. I couldn't even believe it. There was no way I ever saw that coming. So I was actually throwing a benefit for a friend of ours, who's sick, and we were raising money for all her cancer treatments, and it was just bringing the city of San Diego together, to help out, and for them to switch that on me and then give me my own day. That was pretty incredible. So I'll be forever grateful.
How does one celebrate their own day every year? Do you go get a T-bone steak? What's the proper way to celebrate?
Well, unfortunately, I think the last 2 years I've been on tour, so we're usually playing. I think it's been like in Europe. So if anything, it's usually just like an Instagram post saying thank you so much for this day. But I want to be home. I'm not going to be home on this June 23rd because we'll be in Europe. But I want to be home to be able to throw another kind of benefit, a charity, do something, with my foundation. I know I'm trying to get some, like battle of the bands type things going, but I don't know if any, sometimes I might just, I don't know what I'll do, bro. I got to be home to do something cool, but it'll happen.
We need to get this universally and globally accepted as Sunny Day. I have some kind words sent in from another iconic frontman. This is from Tommy Vex, the founding vocalist of the multi-platinum band Bad Wolves. Tommy says,
No.
Sonny is one of the most captivating frontmen of the nu metal, rap metal era. He is also one of the most humble and kind artists I've met over the years. He's a great example of the integrity of God working in a man's heart in an industry filled with so much negativity and darkness. I
Mm.
can't say enough nice things about this guy. That's from Tommy Vex.
Ah, that's awesome. Thanks, Tommy. That's so cool, man. Super, super cool.
So let's dive into POD's newest album. In 2024, you release Veritas. This means truth. Is that correct? Truth
Truth.
in Spanish?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and there's five more singles. This is the band's first album in 6 years. Was it the uncertainty of the pandemic that led to it being such a wide gap, or did that have nothing to do with the release?
No, it was definitely the pandemic. I mean, in the beginning of the pandemic, we already knew that we needed to write a new record, right? Well, we were still working the Circles record, but now with the uncertainty of everything, it was like, okay, once we got a bigger or a broader perspective of where the pandemic was leading, and then it was like just start writing. But at that time, I think we were going through so much as a band personally, and then we were kind of bummed. You know, it's like we've been through so many highs and lows with this band, which is whatever. It keeps us hustling. It keeps us working hard, right? Um, I think at the time it was like, I don't want to write a record right now. It was just like, let's just figure out where this is all going. Um, and then finally, when it started to kind of shut down a little bit, it was like, okay, we need to really get serious and kind of nail it all down. But during the pandemic, Marcus and I, we were driving up to LA, you know, day trips, and we were sitting with our producers, and we would just start throwing down, you know, guitar ideas and vocal ideas. So we were really just building song by song. But it wasn't until the end of COVID where it was like we really need to lock this down, because that, I think every band, that's what they did during COVID. They took it serious and they wrote records, where we were just kind of dragging our feet a little bit. But I think it worked out for the best, because that is one of my favorite records that we've ever done, and the way it came about was just meant to be. Um, we released it, and now the last 2 years we've been working our butts off. We've It's really done really well for us.
There's some heavy hitter guest appearances on this album. There's Randy Blythe from Lamb of God, Tatiana Schmaluk of Ginger, and Cove Reber from Seosin. And then
Mhm.
two of the songs, Afraid to Die and I Won't Bow Down, charted on the Billboard mainstream rock charts. One was a top 20 hit, one was a top 30 hit. What did
Mhm.
it mean to you after all these years to get that kind of support at radio for the new album?
It's awesome. I mean, we had radio support during Murder Love. I think Lost and Forever went number one. Beautiful and higher. I think they charted top 10. But we've come to realize that we're just not that band. This is an industry of favorites. It's an industry of, you know, of who you know. And so if we're not a big, or we're not a part of the conglomerate, it's like it doesn't matter anymore. The industry has changed. That's why you can go down your radio list and it's the same five bands all the time. That's it. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying nothing. I'm just saying we're gonna be the band that we always been. We're gonna work hard, and we're gonna do it because of the love and the passion. It's not about fame. Never really cared about that. I mean, would we all love to retire, and you know, we all want to feed our families? But this isn't an industry of getting rich either. So that's not a driving force for POD, um, because we're not rich. We are a blue collar working band that continues to do it for the love. Um, and so wherever those songs land in the radio chart, we're not expecting of anything different. It's just, it's like you said, having the recognition of these heavy hitters to be, and we've done that through all our records. Look at all our records. Every artist that has been on a POD record is out of respect. It's out of love for this band, and it speaks volumes. The legends that we've had on all of our albums, you know, the living legends that are on our albums. It speaks volumes. And but we know our place in this world. We know our place in this industry. Um, but we still keep grinding, keep hustling. It's the fans that still care about our next record. It's what drives us. It's what keeps us hungry. And so we'll keep doing it as long as people are listening, until we can't do it anymore. That's just facts.
You had a busy 2025 releasing your book, Son of Southtown, and then your debut
Mm.
solo album, Sunny Dread. When did you first start thinking about writing a book?
A lot of my peers and friends have been doing it, and you know, and I've always people been encouraging me for years. And then when COVID came around, it really did spark up both the projects. Um, we were at home, and I'm not used to being at home, and so when they told us that we were going to be sitting, this pandemic was happening, and we're going to be stuck in our houses for 3 months, we celebrated. We were like, this is great. I get to be home with my wife and my kids. Like, there's nothing else better than that. But then, after a few months, it was like, wow, this is getting kind of scary. This is what I do for a living, and like I said, I'm blue collar. I'm living check to check. It's not like I have this, crazy savings account that I can just retire whenever I want. And music is just for fun. It's a hobby. Like, this is my job. This is how I put my kids through college. This is how I put food on the table. And so when all that was, was when it was a possibility that that was going to change, it was a little scary. So, but it did give me the time to sit down and write a book. It did give me recording my own music gave me a chance to be creative instead of just sitting waiting for the world to end, and it was something that I got to do. So this record is literally 5 years old. I was just finally able to release it. That's why I just did it independently. It was like I wasn't trying to make a big deal out of it. It was like, dude, I've been sitting on this music for 5 years. Like, I just want to play some shows. So I could have played shows, but what's the point if you don't have anything on Spotify or Apple or your streaming platforms? It's like, it's just, there's a process in doing it. So finally it was like, let's just put it out because I just want to do some shows. And so now I'm in the process of doing that in between P.O.D schedule.
The book seems to be having a ton of success in other countries and other languages. How
Mm.
has your experience been as a first-time author? And have you learned anything about the literary world coming as an outsider, as a musician?
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I think the book is just a fast forward look from kind of when I was born and up until right before COVID, and it's a fast paced look. I would need to write 10 more books just to fill in all the details in between. You know what I mean? Which I hope to do. It was an awesome experience, but it's just more of an extension of my life outside of what people know me as Sonny, the front man of P.O.D. It's like there's so much more depth to what's going on, and so this just really it takes a personal look of my ups and downs, my struggles, my faith, why I continue to do what I do. You know, this calling that I feel that God has put in my life, and so this is an extension of that. And then, like you said, Brazil picked it up and translated into Portuguese. So when I did the South America tour, I was able to promote that book, and it's been really cool, man. That last year was a busy year, and it's still busy. I'm still continuing off of that, but I hope to do another book, and I definitely will be recording new music for sure. That's a given. But it's the same thing as POD. If people appreciate it and they're paying attention and they really do see why I've been doing this, then that's all the motivation I need to keep on trying.
You definitely had a story to share because I mentioned I've been a POD fan for, I don't know, 25 years.
Mm.
And I thought I knew a lot about POD, and there was so much that I had no idea
Yeah.
about your life and about the band through the book. So I feel like for POD fans, there's a lot to sink your teeth into. Even if you think you know Sunny's
Yeah.
story, you think you know, but you don't really know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. And I guess that's the reason of writing a book, you know what I mean? So that's what I wanted people to dive into is just it's not just another rock and roll story. It's not just about, you know, being in rock and roll. It's just about us having purpose in life and living out our potential and trusting God in the process. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's number one to me. I know without a shadow of a doubt that God created us for a purpose and a reason, that He loves us and that He's with us. It doesn't mean life is easy. It doesn't mean we don't struggle and go through ups and downs, but you either believe and trust that God is good or He's not. And I know that He's good. So it gives me the faith to keep on fighting, to keep on working hard, to keep on moving through a lot of difficulties in this life. And knowing who God is and knowing what God thinks of me, I know who I am. And I think that's what this world mostly in 2026 is looking for. They're trying to find out who they are.
So I'm gonna blast through the final few fan questions here. So Evelyn, I just want to give him a shout out for sending in
Yeah.
questions. So Evelyn Withrow, she starts by saying, "I really love your work and dedication to your family and Christian faith. Sonny, you've done so many great things with your music, and you're an author now as well. Would you ever give any consideration to acting?" So that's one question. Would you ever consider acting? And I like your reaction. And then the other
That's
question
good.
is from Patrick, and Patrick is asking, "What keeps you creative?" Cheers from Patrick in Germany. So would you consider acting, and what keeps you creative?
Um, I think I would be scared to death to do acting, but it does intrigue me. But actors are a whole different breed, you know, but it does intrigue me. Like I would probably start with doing like voiceover first, you know, something like that. But I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind if it was the right role, but I don't know, man. I'm such a fan of movies and actors that I just don't want to mess that shit up. But hey, all in fun, I would. And then what was the next question?
What's keeping you creative now after decades as a musician?
I think that there's always new listeners. You know, I think there's always new people that are moved by the story, and so it's like I said before. As long as there's people still, it still impacts people and it still makes a difference. Then like I want to try to keep doing it. You know what I mean? That's been doing this for 34 years, and it's not because I ever wanted to be famous or be known or be a rock star. It's because it really does have impact on people that are paying attention for this life and eternally. And so I want to see, I just want to see people change. I want to see people go from depressed to happy. You know what I mean? I want them to go from crying to smiling. It's just and music does that. And art does that. And so if I can continue to be creative in any way, I just want to see people get out of this oh this stronghold that this world has on all of us. You know what I mean? I want to see people break free of all that.
So I've been listening to your solo album a few times now, including yesterday. I was bumping the album, and man, the album is such a vibe. That's the best way I can
Mm,
describe it. Is it's a
yeah,
vibe. You know what I
that's
mean?
awesome.
And
That's
there's
awesome.
lots of great collaborations on there. You must be so proud of that solo album. It's one thing to have all these POD albums, but this is venturing out into something completely different. So if it was my album, I would be proud. I'm wondering if you're proud of this album.
Oh, thanks. Extremely proud, man. I've been 100,000% POD and I am, but it's also maybe it was COVID. I don't know. You know, maybe it was this little break that allowed me to do that, and for that I'll be grateful. But I've always been in the POD lane, and I still am. But this was a cool way to just get out and again, it's just the music is the album is just another extension of me. It's not like you haven't heard this in POD before. It was just having the opportunity to do that while we were kind of on this break or this hiatus. And it really, if anything, it was more therapeutic for me just to kind of get it out and do this. And so, again, for people to be able to get a hold of it, to listen to it, is a cool thing. And I think it is a vibe. It's gonna make people smile. It's gonna make people feel happy, and I can't wait to perform it live.
2026 has just started, and you guys have already announced a bunch of festivals, a bunch of shows. If our listeners go right now and they purchase a ticket to one of these events, what can they expect from POD in concert if they've never seen the band before?
I mean, we're definitely a live band, even now, and the 34 years later, we still love playing. I think every show is still, we don't take it for granted. We're still stoked. We did Europe last year. We did South America. We're going to Japan next month. Um, Europe in the summer. It's like we still look at each other in awe and be like, dude, I can't believe we're still doing this, man. And I can't believe there's a sold out crowd. And I can't. We're we are more grateful now, 34 years later, than I think we've ever been, right? Because we've experienced the highs, the lows. It's been such a wild ride that we really can sit back and be like, dude, I can't believe we're still doing this together, and it's a blast. And so when you come out, I mean, we just want people to sing, you know. If moving and dancing and crowd surfing and stage diving is not your thing, then just sit back, relax, but let the music do what it's always done. And that's why you decided to come out to a P.O.D show in the first place, is because we do have a connection. And I think the live show is just, it's a bigger, broader feeling of that connection that we have. And it's very personal. And so I think you're going to have fun.
When you kick into the song Boom, I think the Holy Spirit might take over, even if you don't want to dance or mosh or jump.
There's, yeah, that's the power of music, man. It's gonna make you lose your mind for a second, but that's the fun part of a POD show.
I have some kind words from somebody that was there on that big tour with Seether, with P.O.D, Cami Kehoe, and Daughtry. He was there. He experienced that tour with you. This is from Daughtry guitarist Brian Craddock. And Brian says,
Oh,
Sonny has a presence that simply inspires. His performances are invigorating and passionate. Night after night, I watched the crowd feed on his positive energy as he elevated each show higher than the last. Sonny and
mm,
P.O.D are true class acts. That's from Brian Craddock, Daughtry.
oh, my man, that's awesome, dude. So cool. This was such a fun tour. Everybody is just so cool. Even the crew. I mean, even the Dachi crew was awesome. I love when you can go on tours and everybody just a vibe to it. And these guys are all professionals. You know, what I mean, they're all veterans in this game, and so I think we all kind of are. We feel that way just being on these amazing tours, that we still get to do it. You know, people are out there. They're moved by what we do, and yeah, it's inspiring, man. I'm really appreciative of all these kind words.
Final two fan questions here. One is from Beatrice, and she says, Hi, Sonny. When are you guys coming back to Brazil? We already miss P.O.D so much. Weren't you just there?
Oh man, we were just there. I don't know if it would be this year. It would have to be like some crazy package. You know what I mean? Like we would love to tour um, and support another band down there, because it's just a different experience. We'll do these, sold out club headlines, and they don't get any better than that. But I think we need to do something on a bigger level next time. Um, and so I had just gotten called. Matter of fact, I had just gotten called. Dave from El Nino hit me up yesterday and said, "Hey, that they were going down there with Head PE, and they were like, we wanted to know if you wanted to come down to do your reggae stuff." And I thought, how cool! That would be the perfect mix with El Nino, Head PE to go in and do a reggae set. Um, but I'm already scheduled for stuff. But I wish I could do it. That would be awesome. If I to go down there with the reggae project, I think it would. I think people would really vibe to it.
We need cloning technology to catch up to have two Sonnies, one to do the solo stuff, one to do the POD stuff. And we have one final question from a fan. This is from Kristen Jackin. Her question is, who has been the kindest band that you've toured with? There's lots of nice guys in the industry.
Yeah,
Can you think of a few examples?
yeah. There's not lots of nice guys, and then there's not lots of nice people. I always say this. People ask me for my first experience, because they took us out in 2000, was the Seven Dust Boys, and they are absolute Southern gentlemen. They are sweethearts. To this day, they have not changed. They are, every time you see them, they make you smile. Welcome with hugs and kisses. They're great. I think it's just that Southern hospitality and that charm. Um, and then the Shinedown Boys took us out on the road, and they are just as equally sweethearts. And I think it's just upbringing, man. I think it's just upbringing. You come from families that taught you how to behave. That's it, man. Taught you how to treat people. So it's a lost character, how to treat people well, and they're good guys. And then I would say, even on this Seether tour, um, Corey, who obviously related to the Seven Dust Camp. It's just upbringing, man. Just a sweetheart. when you see people that, every time you see them coming down the hall or by their bus, and as soon as you see them, you just smile, and it's just a reflection off from your heart. It's like they're making your heart smile, and then your smile just happens naturally because it's more like it affects your heart, and you just know good people. And then there's people that you walk by and you're like, "What's up, dude?" There's nothing, but then there's the good ones that you're like, "Oh man, that's is worthy of a hug." And there's some of the guys right there.
So I have one final quote, and this is the one quote to rule them all. Because since 2024, when you turn around on stage, you have a fresh face on the drum kit. So this is from
Mm.
Zachary Christopher, and he
Oh
wrote
man.
quite possibly the longest quote in the podcast 6 year history. So
Oh
hang
man.
tight because this
Yeah.
guy writes from the heart, and he says, what do you even say about Sonny Sandoval, Sonny Dread, Paul Joshua, a man of many names, but one heart? A man
Mhm.
whose leadership, kindness, and selflessness shines bright enough for everyone around him to see. It's impossible to harbor negativity when his positive outlook on life is so infectious. His perspective on life is so rooted in gratitude and faith that it shifts the atmosphere of whatever room or arena he walks into. Back in 2019, my band had the opportunity to open for P.O.D on their European tour. I was this young kid who grew up discovering P.O.D when my bedroom was a closet essentially, and the only
Mhm.
gift I got for Christmas one year was the satellite CD. I never imagined that 6 years later, I'd be sitting behind Sonny on drums every night with the best seat in the house, watching him do what he does. And what's wild about Sonny is this: offstage, he's calm, grounded, soft spoken, but the second he hits the stage, he flips a switch and pours out every ounce of energy into the crowd. Watching that transformation night after night has taught me so much about intention. He's more than a friend, he's a brother, even a father
Mm.
figure in many ways. Watching how he loves his kids, how he raises them, that impacted me deeply. You see it in his children too, the respect, the kindness, the way they treat people. That doesn't happen by accident. That's leadership at home. Some of my favorite memories aren't even the shows. They're the long bus rides in the back lounge, watching movies, hunting down the best brewery in whatever city or country we're in, walking miles just to find a great spot to eat, taking in the scenery, and not taking a single moment for granted. Sonny lives life fully, and he reminds everyone around him to do the same. Being part of P.O.D and sharing those moments has truly been one of the greatest blessings of my life. I can honestly say Sonny is one of the best souls I've ever met. It's a true honor to know him, to work alongside him, and to call him my brother. Here's to many
Mm.
more years. That's Zachary Christopher, drummer for P.O.D.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I'm speechless. Try not to cry.
We got to get
Yeah.
some Kleenex in here. So
Whew.
as
Yeah.
we wrap up, I just have two more questions for you here. If
Yeah.
you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self and you could whisper words of advice and you could take everything you've learned since 10 years old, all the lessons and
Mm.
mentorship, the experiences, highs and lows, successes and failures. What do you whisper to cute little Sonny sitting there to guide him through this human experience?
Oh man. I kind of say this to the end of my book when I'm not to give it away, but where I'm talking to my son, and it's like because I can see who my son is, because I know his potential, I know what kind of soul he is. I might not have known that about me at 10 of myself at 10, but I know that's who he is. I know that's who my kids are. And so in my book I write it, but I told my son that because I recognize who he is, I said to live your life and be free, and don't be bound by anyone, no man, because only God and God alone guides our footsteps. And so whether it's struggles, ups and downs, mistakes, live your life unto God, and don't have any regrets. I think if I would have like I'm such a people pleaser, but sometimes because I want to see people happy, I want to see people find love and goodness to their soul. But um a lot of times that can hinder you. A lot of times trying to please, it's learning now that you can't please everybody. And it's a hard thing to accept. And so, and again, not answering, you don't have to answer to everybody else. Especially for me is that it's this kind of religious system or like, certain privileges and people. You don't have to please them. Just if you know who God is, then stay true to that and stay true to who God created you to be and live that out to the fullest. And don't be afraid of mistakes. Don't be afraid of failures. And don't even be afraid of letting people down because at some point you're gonna. But if that's gonna keep you all wound up because you don't want to disappoint this person, you don't want to let these people down, and you're always trying to please a certain group, you're never gonna live your life to the fullest. And so, when I'm speaking to my kids, I don't want them to have any chains, especially not from this world. I don't want no chains to lock them down, but I don't want even personal relationships or people that are always trying to implant who you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do, and putting those boundaries on your life. I don't want that for my kids. I want them to be free only because I know that their hearts and minds are right already. And if your heart and mind is right before God, then be free to live your life, and don't be afraid to live it.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the fans that have been on this journey with you since 1992?
I'm more grateful than they'll ever know. I even hate saying that. I hate saying fan because it sounds like a separation. It sounds like I'm better, I'm higher, or I've achieved more. I every time I have to say that word, I pause because I'm like, there's no difference, dude. Like, but the only reason why I can say it is because I recognize it, dude. I am a fan. I am a fan myself. So that's not a bad word. It's not a bad thing. I just don't like the separation. Even a stage to audience. I've never. That's why I've always been in the crowd. I'm always jumping in. Like I don't want there to be a separation of me on the stage, you below the stage, because at the end of the day, I, I sit. It's equal even when I speak at like events and stuff, I hate that feeling. I have to come down to an eye level where it's like, dude, I'm not speaking at you. It's not because I have it all figured out. It's like all I could do is share my experiences and what I've gone through, and hope that that has an impact on you to maybe not make the same mistakes, to maybe see life in a different perspective that might make your heart happy rather than dwelling on something that might bring you down in the dumps. You know what I mean? So I am 100%. I know that I would have never could have done this, or I would have quit a long time ago if it wasn't for the encouragement of people that actually dig what I do. And I say this all the time. I don't need to hear you rock. I don't need to hear, dude, you're so great. That does nothing for me. I don't need an ego. I don't have an ego for you to boost up. It's the ones that say, dude, your music changed my life. Your book changed my life. I was gonna kill myself, and then Alive came on the radio. I I had been struggling with this drug for so many years. I had been in an abusive relationship. It was this song that made me run and get out of it. It's your this album that made God real to me. Whatever the case is, it has made me stronger and it has given me more fuel to keep on going because I'm just as human as them. I've wanted to quit so many times. I go through my own life, but it's like there's such a joy in serving people, and I feel like what I do is not it's not something to purchase. It's not an art to purchase for consumers. It's just I hope that it serves you well. I hope that my music, my book, I hope that whatever I do in my life, I hope that it serves you well and encouraging you to do the same for others because it truly brings me joy. And I think when people learn to serve others and to yeah and to just love others, there's a certain joy that comes with that will it will take your darkest day and it will brighten it up.
So, as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a singer, as a songwriter.
Mm,
I commend you for having a big vision for your life, for setting goals, for working towards those goals on a daily basis. You've shown the rest of us what's truly possible if we also commit to our goals. I want to thank you
mm.
for putting out great music that's become the soundtrack to the lives of millions of people around the world, mine included. I mentioned I've been a big P.O.D. fan for a very long time. I want to thank you for being one of the good guys in the music industry. As we've heard from all those quotes that
Yeah,
we got, they all said the same thing. It's consistent across the board. And last but not least, I want to thank you for this interview, sitting down with me for the last 2 hours, answering all my ridiculous POD questions that I've had for decades. So thank you so much,
it's
Sonny. I
awesome.
really appreciate it.
Hey man, thank you so much, bro. That means more than you know. It's been really cool to hang out and talk with you, man.
Thank you for the kind words. You're very welcome. So, to the Sunny fans, to the POD fans, to the podcast fans, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you guys.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Who would you like me to feature next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know in the comments. You can also send me an email at joelmartinmastery@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on all social media platforms at joelmartinmastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.